At around the age of 7 years old, Puerto Rican native and kid by the name of Edwin Diaz started to play baseball. He started out playing the outfield, mostly center field, and actually grew up playing with guys like Carlos Correa and Jose Barrios. Edwin's father wanted his son to pitch, insisting he should try it, and he didn't really want to, doing so reluctantly. Skip ahead 20 years into the future, and it looks like pitching was the right way to go for Edwin Diaz. In 2012, Diaz was selected in the third round of the MLB draft by the Seattle Mariners out of the Caguas Military Academy in Caguas, Puerto Rico, and off his professional career began. It didn't take overnight, but Diaz would go on to make it to the big leagues, with the Mariners calling up the 22-year-old on June 4th of 2016. From the time he was drafted to the moment he got called up to the show, the Mariners had preferred Diaz more as a reliever rather than as a starting pitcher, and that paid off. In the same year he got called up, less than 2 months later in fact, Diaz became the new Mariners closer, replacing Mariners reliever Steve Cishek in the role. He finished off 2016 with a 2.79 ERA and 51 2/3 innings, but that does not tell the whole story. His stuff was electric. Edwin Diaz was a king of strikeouts. Between June 28th and July 3rd, he recorded 10 consecutive outs via the strikeout, tying a Mariners franchise record set in 1997, and went on to break that franchise record. He also recorded 8 consecutive strikeouts later in the year, tying him for second place with 4 different American League pitchers for the American League record. Diaz also struck out his 50th hitter in only 25 1/3 innings, becoming the first pitcher to do that in at least 123 years. To put it simply, Edwin Diaz was a freak out there on the mound, and the Mariners were lucky to have him. 2017 wasn't quite as dominant as his rookie season, but it was still a solid year, as he throws 66 innings with a 3.27 ERA, striking out 89 hitters. In 2018, Diaz made his first All-Star team, deservingly so. In 2018, Edwin Diaz threw over 73 innings, recorded 57 saves, the most in baseball, struck out 124 hitters while walking just 17. He was elite and the best closer in baseball that season. Unfortunately, his Mariners did not make it to October despite winning 89 games they won in large part because of Diaz, and so Seattle decided to make a trade. It was a pretty big trade considering the $20 million a year Robinson Cano was in the package getting sent to New York, along with Edwin Diaz. The Mariners received 5 players in the deal, and soon after, it was looking like a real bad trade for the Mets. 2019 was really bad, to say the least, for Edwin Diaz, as his ERA on the year was 5.59 in 58 innings pitched. His strikeout numbers were there, but when you give up 15 home runs as a reliever in one season, you're probably not going to have great numbers and results overall. Meanwhile, Kelnick, one of the players sent over to Seattle in exchange for Cano and Diaz, was looked at as one of the most prized prospects in baseball. He was drafted 6th overall by the Mets and soon became an exciting future piece for the Mariners organization. So yeah, not looking great. Diaz did do well in the semi-meaningless shortened 2020 season, and then 2021 came around, and again, the strikeout numbers were there, and he actually had a good season overall, but he wasn't what he was in Seattle. Not yet. Now, he is that man that he was in Seattle, if not better. The trade looked incredibly lopsided at first, considering the Mariners got a top prospect, plus 4 other players, while the Mets got Robinson Cano, who got suspended for PEDs and was so bad they ended up having to release him, along with a pretty good reliever in Diaz, but that's just not good enough when you're giving up who they gave up. Well, let's look at those 5 players who went to Seattle and where they're at right now. Jay Bruce ended up being traded to the Phillies, eventually ended up on the Yankees, and retired in 2021. Anthony Swarzak is a career 4.42 ERA pitcher who's bounced around numerous times to many different teams, and is currently a free agent after being released by the Royals last year. Gerson Bautista has a career ERA of over 11 and is currently pitching in Mexico, and Justin Dunn is another pitcher who ended up being traded to the Reds after pitching pretty poorly for Seattle. Okay, so that's 4 guys who amounted to nothing, at least with Seattle, but the trade was mostly for the 5th player, Kelnick. So how has he done so far? Kelnick has been a really exciting baseball player in the minor leagues. As for the major leagues, it's no secret that he's been awful. In 2021, he hit 181 with an OPS around 600. As for this year, he hit so bad to start off the season, he was sent down to AAA. He's since been called back up because of the Julio Rodriguez injury, but overall this season, he's hitting 131 with a 477 OPS. Now, granted, he's 22 years old for God's sake, There's no need to call him a bust just because he hasn't been good in his first 130 games or so. Is it alarming? Yes, for sure. But at the end of the day, maybe the trade wasn't so bad after all for the Mets, especially when you consider how Edwin Diaz has been in 2022. So far this season, Diaz has gone back to his 2018 form as one of, if not the best closer in baseball. In 45 appearances, Diaz has thrown over 45 innings with a 1.39 ERA. He's also struck out 91 hitters and walked only 12, which is about a 7.5 strikeouts to walk ratio, and a baffling 18.1 strikeouts per 9. The Mets are one of the best teams in all of baseball, in large part because of how automatic Diaz has been at the back end of their bullpen, saving 26 games for them this season. He also has a pretty electric walkout experience at Citi Field, running out of the bullpen to the trumpets blaring as the fans get into it before he starts pumping in 101-mile-an-hour fastballs and pairing that with 92-mile-an-hour sliders to strike everyone out. We'll see how Diaz and the Mets finish the year off, but as of right now, that trade with Seattle isn't looking so much like a loss, and if anything, could be a win depending on how things continue to play out.